Well, good evening, church family. Now, I know these are incredibly busy days. So this evening, I want to take just 4 minutes of your time to issue a challenge and to share a need. The challenge is a call to prayer, a call to earnest prayer, to pray passionately about a need. We learned what that looked like from the early church this past Sunday. The early church was in a crisis maybe like never before because one of the disciples by the name of James had been put to death by the sword. Now, the powers that be were thrilled by the fact that James had been put to death. So much so that the powers that be took Peter and put him in prison. And he was going to spend the next few days there. And in the next few days, at the close of Passover, Peter was likely to face the same fate as James. He'd be put to death. But in the meantime, in the middle of this crisis, here's what the early church did. It's Acts chapter 12, verse 5. But the church earnestly prayed for him, and they prayed to God for him. In response to a crisis, the church prayed passionately for Peter's release. God hears their prayer, and Peter is miraculously released from prison. And he goes to the place where all these people had gathered to pray. He knocks on the door, and they could hardly believe that Peter was at the door. In fact, someone said, "You're out of your mind." They were so amazed that God had answered their prayer because it seemed so impossible. We should never be surprised when God answers the prayers of his people. We know that prayer matters. And it's for that reason that we're calling the entire church to a season of prayer May 1st through June 5th. And we're asking for every man, woman, child, and teenager to participate in this prayer initiative. In fact, 500,000 Nazarenes around the USA and Canada are going to join us praying for God's protective hand, for his direction, and for a new revelation from God about what he would like to do through and in the church. For this prayer initiative, we're going to resource you. For every adult, we have, first of all, a prayer journal that contains a devotion for every day. And then there's a space at the bottom for you to write notes about how God may have spoken to you through that devotion that day. And then there's a magazine filled with articles about the power of prayer and the significance of prayer in the life of a believer. There's a prayer guide for our teenagers, and there's even a prayer journal for our children. You can pick up these resources either in the foyer of the church in a printed format. You can download them from the church's website, or you can even download an app to your phone so that you have the prayer initiative with you wherever you go. So we know that prayer matters. We know that God answers the prayers of his people. So I challenge you to join us in a passionate season of prayer for a fresh outpouring of God's presence in the life of his people. But there's also a need I want to share with you this evening. It's the need of generosity, of God's people giving faithfully and consistently to the ongoing work of his kingdom. Over this past church year, your giving has been incredible. But from time to time, we find ourselves a little short from what's needed. And April was one of those months. In fact, this month we were significantly below what is needed to do the ongoing work of the kingdom. And for that reason, I just share this need with you. And I ask two things for your church. First of all, that you would earnestly, passionately pray about this need. And secondly, as you earnestly pray, that you would listen to what God might have you do to help us overcome the deficit of the month of April. Hey, I love you. I'm thankful for these few minutes you've given me tonight. I'm looking forward to our time together this Sunday morning, and I hope to see you here.